good day to be together. Amen? Let's take a deep breath. I'm grateful for your presence and for our presence together in this community this day as we explore transcending fear. Transcending fear. I'll be honest with you, this was an interesting one to dive into and sit with over the last week. And I'll back up just a little bit and say that our larger theme for the month is dealing with the stewardship of the earth, ensuring the stewardship of our planet, which is one of the prophetic justice principles that we're exploring all year long. And so connecting this idea of transcending our fear with stewardship of the earth was kind of a strange thing to juggle and balance throughout the week. But I began by focusing and thinking about all of the ways in which the media and the way in which we are bombarded with messages about everything that's wrong with us. Everything that's wrong with the planet, everything wrong with humanity, everything wrong with politics, everything wrong with how we treat each other, everything wrong with race relations, with the economy, with anybody else get bombarded with messages about it's everywhere, right? From the soap that they're trying to sell you to to the makeup to everything else. It's all trying to fix something, right? And I sat and realized that underneath that there is a fear that is driving so much of that. And what I've noticed in my life is that true change and transformation really doesn't come from being afraid of anything, right? We use it sometimes as let me be honest. I use it sometimes as a parenting tactic, right? Right? We try to make your child afraid of something. You better watch out. You better do that, right? Better not touch that. Better not. Well, I've told you again, right? But the truth is that doesn't really work. Right? It's not very effective. Right? The child's going to do what they're going to do. They're going to explore their environment. And that same parenting technique we find throughout the Gospels, particularly in the Torah and the Genesis and Exodus. We find this angry and vengeful God that is cast as an angry and vengeful God. But in truth, when you look at it, there's a relationship of a loving parent that is constantly telling its children, "Don't do this, don't do that, and if you do this, I might have to punish you." And then what do we go and do? We do it. God's like, "Oh. Right? Now I gotta follow through on my punishment to wipe you all out. Right? You ever, as a parent, where's my parents at? Come on. You ever said something to your child like, "Don't do that or else I'm gonna," right? And you just let the most, vitriolic thing you could think of come out of your mouth, and then the child goes and does it, and you're like, "Oh, now I gotta follow through on that. Otherwise, they're not going to take me seriously," right? But of course you don't. You don't go to that extreme. You find some way to back up and say, all right. And that's what we see in the Bible stories over and over again, as God backs up and says, okay, all right, well, look, tell you what, we'll do this instead. Now, next time, please don't do that. And then humanity does it again, right? So this cycle over and over and over again. And fear is an interesting thing to examine because, of course, we have fear that is biological and we have fear that is psychological. And so if we try to break this down and talk about our connection with stewardship in the earth, we've been talking all month about our relationship with the divine, with creation, that we have an intimate relationship with creation because we were formed out of the dust of the earth. And that we have this intimate covenant and responsibility to take care of the planet because we are the image and likeness of God. We are the place where God shows up. You and I are go ahead and just touch yourself and say, I'm the place where God shows up. Right? Look at your neighbor and say, you are the place where God shows up. And so if it's going to happen, it's going to be because we do it. If the world's going to become a better place, it's going to be because we start treating each other better. If the environment's going to get cleaned up, it's going to be because we clean it up, right? So these are the ways in which, right? And so how do we overcome the gripping psychological effects that fear has on us. Because, to be honest with you, I don't think we transcend fear. We'll get to what we do with it in a moment. But there are two types of fear, right? The biological fear and then psychological fear. Now, biological fear keeps you alive. I hope that if you step off the curb and you see a bus coming at you, you know, some anxiety and some adrenaline gets pumping, right? That's a good thing, right? And it's hardwired into our brains that our brain is constantly surveying the environment, looking for danger, looking for harm, and being on the lookout for. And that goes way back to our prehistoric self, and looking for animals and various things that might harm us. And so constantly scanning the environment. But we have a tremendous capacity as human beings we're highly adaptable to overcome our fears and our challenges in our external world, and to adapt to the challenges that are around us, to tame the environment, to learn about what's around us and what we really have to fear and what we don't have to fear, and how to keep ourselves safe. And so we're highly adaptable human beings. So we know that from a biological standpoint, we don't have to constantly be living in fear. But why is it that psychologically we continue to be driven by fear? I love watching my son William, 2.5, and I love watching him interact with his environment, and when fear comes up in him, right? When he encounters something that is unknown to him, or he sees something, sometimes it's even on TV or a cartoon, something kind of big and scary, and he's seeing it or interacting with it for the first time, he's afraid, and he'll come running over to me, tuck his head between my legs, and then look back at the TV. Look at me, make sure it's okay, right? Or if he encounters something out in the world, right, he'll venture off, and then he'll encounter something, and then he'll come running back to me or his mom, right? And then look at us, and then go back and explore it again, wants to know what it is. And there's a simple, profound truth about how to approach our fears that we find in those children, right? Because what I find is that William doesn't let fear drive his life, nor does any other child. They actually engage with it. They actually encounter it. They actually dance with it. And they say, what is this? What is this? Right? Daddy, what is this? Right? I say, oh, that's a waterfall, baby. A waterfall? Yeah, a waterfall. Now he knows, right? And then he begins piecing the things together. Like, well, I know water from my bath time, and that's not scary. Oh, it's a waterfall? Like, yeah, but you don't want to get too close to it, And he says, oh, I love it when he does it. Oh, right? So he embraces it, he engages with it, and he becomes more of himself as a result of it. Now he has a way of interacting with his environment where he is more complete as a human being than he was a moment before he didn't know what that thing was. How simple is that formula that we could all follow in our everyday life, right? So for the last couple of weeks in this idea of stewardship for the earth, we've explored our internal rift of the humanity's rift with the natural world around us. We've talked about Cain and Abel, and today I want to talk about the story before that in Genesis. I mentioned, I think, the first week in September, and I said I'll come back to that. And it's a story in which Adam is hiding in the garden, right? They've eaten from the tree of knowledge, the tree of wisdom, and now God is looking for them. It says in the cool of the day. Oh, can we all just say amen to that for a minute? In the cool of the day. Thank you, Jesus. It's coming. That's what they tell me anyway. They tell me it's coming. The cool of the day. And God's looking for him. Can't find him. Can't find Adam. So he calls out to him. And Adam comes back and he says, I'm over here. And God says, well, why are you hiding? And Adam says, we were naked. We heard your voice, and we were naked and afraid. And God responds and says, who told you you were naked? You remember what I said after that, right? Remember in the terrible translation, the NIV, but the next line he says, that woman. I said, we're going to have to go back and unpackage that. So today we're going to unpackage that a little bit, right? But in order to do that, we need to back up just a little bit more. What is it that we fear? Biologically, we fear things that are perceived as threats to our safety and our well-being. But psychologically, more often than not, what we fear is the unknown. We fear that which we don't understand. And the story that's being told in Genesis is a story of relationship between human consciousness and the divine. A story between the magnificence of creation and the human relationship with that thing, the thing itself. And so it's often said that we were made in God's image and then humanity returned the favor. Because there's two things that we do when we're in fear. First thing we do is deflect, right? That woman. Right? In other translations, it says the woman that you sent, right? Which is like, didn't come from me, right? Remember the story as it came out of Adam. It says, not the one that came from me, the woman you sent. Like she arrived in an Amazon box on the doorstep. I didn't order this. So there's separation and deflection that happens, right? In order to make ourselves feel safe when we encounter the unknown, we separate ourselves from it, and then we say, it doesn't have anything to do with me, right? So we deflect, and then we project. And in the projection, we project onto the thing that we don't understand, the thing that we do understand. And what is it that we understand? We understand ourselves. We understand our consciousness. Even if we don't understand how it works, it's what we know. And so we can only work with what we know. Did you know that? You can only work with what you know, which is why you're here today, to grow, to spiritually expand, to open yourself up to learning more, because you can only work with what you know. And so in our relationship with the divine, we can only work with what we know. Humanity works with what it knows, and it projects onto the divine its own image of itself. The only way that you can know God is the way that you know yourself. And so what turns out that we don't have an angry God that seeks to wipe out humanity. What we have is a lack of understanding of the rhythms of nature. Storms and earthquakes and fires and floods and the rhythms of Mother Nature and our relationship with that. But out of our lack of understanding of that throughout human's history, we projected onto those things, that the God must be angry. The divine must be angry. It must have been something you did. It must have been something that woman did. It must have been something we did. It must have been something they did. And in order to keep us, remember, biologically safe and protected, let's not do that thing anymore, right? But it's all a projection of our own lack of understanding of ourselves. And so what we discover as our consciousness continues to expand is that we don't have an angry God. We have an underdeveloped and immature psyche resulting from a lack of an intimate relationship with ourselves. Let me say that again. I'll say it again. Right? We don't have an angry God. We have an underdeveloped and immature psyche which results from the lack of an intimate relationship with ourselves, because we don't know ourselves deeply. And we can't possibly understand God or the divine or the intimate or the wisdom of the ages, whatever you want to call it. And so what we discover when we hold that possibility or that thought that this is about the projection, a relationship of projection, that we then understand that God isn't trying to wipe out humanity for any sort of behavior. God doesn't hate gays. God doesn't hate anyone else and seek to punish whole towns and wipe people out and all of those things. And you might think, oh, those are old primitive stories in the old gospel text. And actually, just as recently as Hurricane Katrina, there were religious leaders who tried to say, well, this is because God's punishing gay people. Hurricane missed the whole French Quarter. My friend, I got to give credit. My friend Bishop Yvette Flunder pointed that out to us. Missed the whole French Quarter. It's supposed to be punishment. Apparently, God doesn't know what goes on in the French Quarter. You understand? So our biological fear is about our safety, but our psychological fear is a perceived safety. But what it's really about, if we go back to that story, we go back just a little bit further, when it says that Adam and Eve were there, it says, when the woman saw the fruit of the tree was for good, was food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took and ate some of it. She gave some to her husband, who was there also, and he ate it. And the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. So out of the awakening of consciousness of wisdom, they realized that they were naked. What could we possibly take from that metaphysically? But perhaps an understanding of what really drives us from in terms of psychological fear. Think about all the things that we psychologically fear. We fear, we say, where's Eric? Eric doing some work on public speaking, speaking circles, and work with our practitioners and all that, right? What's the next to death? What is it? Public speaking, right? Standing in front of people, right? What else are we afraid of? If you look up in psychological ways in which we have expressed our fear, you talk to a psychologist or a counselor, you'll find out people are afraid of success. They're afraid of being successful. They're afraid of being exposed. They're afraid of somebody finding out who they really are. They're afraid of being inadequate. They're afraid of not having enough. They're afraid of some form of lack and limitation. And all of the ways in which fear shows itself in relationship to lack and limitation, that is about a lack of an understanding of our connection with the abundance of nature. And all of the ways in which fears show up as as exposure of some kind, whether that's success or being seen, what do we find right there in the story? When we discovered that this fruit would give us wisdom, their eyes were opened. They discovered that they were naked. In other words, they were vulnerable, and their vulnerability made them afraid. Our most biological, or even psychological rather, fear is the fear of vulnerability, which connects us to the biological one as well, right? Safety and protection. The fear of vulnerability. And it turns out when we talk about transcending fear, the fear of being seen is a manifestation of not accepting our own wholeness. Because the truth is, we can't go through life without really being seen. We won't be successful if we're constantly hiding ourselves. That we find the only way to go through life and not be seen is to imitate others. The only way to go through life and not be seen is to imitate others. But your biological desire and your psychological and spiritual desire is to be your authentic self. And so those two things will be constantly in conflict with each other. You will show up and try to be the person the other person expects you to be. Be the person the other person expects you to be in the relationship. Be the person they expect you to be at the office. Be the person they expect you to be in the family. Putting on the masks of other people, all while there is a spiritual drive within you to be your authentic self. The desire to eat the fruit in the first place, from the woman, from the wisdom, from the divine feminine, is to know thyself, to know wisdom, and to take it in. And so this psychological drive of fear of being seen is a manifestation of not accepting our own wholeness, because the truth is the only way out is through. As William and others, spiritual giants in little bodies, teach us, the dance that we have with our fears is to engage it, to embrace it, to ask it questions. What is this? Why are you here? What do you call that thing? Is it really bad for me, or can I touch it? Right? Can I engage with it just a little bit? Right? And when we begin to ask these questions, we open ourselves up. We make ourselves more vulnerable. Vulnerability is the string that keeps us connected in our covenant with the divine and with each other. Let me say that again. Vulnerability is the string that keeps us connected to our covenant with the divine and with each other. The truth is that I have to make myself vulnerable in order to be self-expressed. I have to make myself seen in order to be who I really am. There is no other way. And so we don't transcend fear, we embrace it. We don't get over our fear. We learn how to walk with it. We learn how to dance with it. We learn how to navigate it in a more prayerful and connected way. Are you following what I'm saying? Ernest Holmes says, fear and faith are identical in the energies used, for the energies used is one and the same. Since there is one but final energy in the universe, and that is the energy of thought. Fear is the positive acceptance that you will experience that which you dislike. Faith is a positive acceptance that you shall experience that which you do like. But they are identical in this mental action. The only difference is the direction. The final energy of the universe is the energy of thought. Fear is a positive acceptance that you shall experience that which you dislike. And faith is a positive acceptance that you shall experience what you do like. And so as we look at our relationship with the planet, with humanity, with each other, with all of life around us, what we have to come into an awareness of is to move our energy into a faith direction, to move our energy into an acceptance that we will experience what we do like, because there's nothing to fear, because God is all that there is. God says, who said that you were naked? Who told you that you were naked? If God is all there is, how could you be naked? So, oh, well, I'm vulnerable about how I'm seen by others. And the whole context of the Bible goes on from that point and says, you got to keep exposing yourself. You got to keep making yourself available. You got to keep opening yourself up. You got to keep connected to humanity. You got to keep loving your neighbor as yourself. You got to keep in this covenant relationship. You can't isolate yourself and protect yourself from anything. Why? Because you came from the very dust of the ground. I pulled you out of the very earth itself. Brian Swim says the creation story is what happens when you take a balloon of hydrogen and just let it sit there. And then it becomes giraffes and rose bushes and people. Right? So we have come from the very dust of the earth. We've come from the very ground of being itself. And so we are one, and there's nothing to fear. Ernest Holmes says, in What We Believe, he says, we believe the ultimate goal of life to be a complete emancipation from all discord of every nature, and that this goal is sure to be attained by all. This goal is sure to be attained by all, to be emancipated from discord of every nature, including our own psychological projections and fears. When God is no longer a being who's seeking to punish us, but God is a divine energy that is seeking to express through us, then fear vanishes. Ernest Holmes said in the Sermon by the Sea, find me one person who no longer has any fear of the universe or of God or of man or of anything else, and you will have brought to me someone in whose presence we may sit, and fear shall vanish as the clouds before the sunlight. Find me one person who no longer has any fear of the universe or of God or of man or of anything else, and you will have brought to me someone in whose presence we may sit, and fear shall vanish as clouds before the sunlight. Can you feel that? If we just allow ourselves to sit in the presence of God, to know our oneness, to know that we have come from all that is around us, that we are intimately one with all of creation and all expressions of that creation that surround us, then there is nothing to fear, because there's only the expression of the one life divine that is seeking to know itself and as you and as me. That means it's seeking to know itself as every problem you have. It's seeking to know itself as every challenge you have. It's seeking to know itself as every challenge facing the human condition. It's seeking to know itself through the environmental uprising, through the imbalance of use of natural resources. It's seeking to know itself so that through those challenges, just like if you're going to build your muscles, something's got to break down first, right? If you're going to exercise, those muscles are going to break down first before they build back up. But there's only one thing happening on the planet, and that's the expression of the divine wisdom of the ages trying to break through. And so, yeah, there are things breaking down, and there are things falling apart, and there are things seemingly pulling apart. But those are all the muscles of God in action trying to bring forth a deeper wisdom. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's only something to embrace. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's only something to interact with. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's only something to engage. And so we don't transcend our fear. We embrace it. We bring it to the light and ask it, why is it here? And then we begin to reframe it. We begin to reframe it as part of our story, as part of our awakening, as part of our unfolding. That this thing that I was once afraid of, I now see that it's here to teach me. It's here to bring me light and wisdom. It's here to bring me into my fuller self, that in order for me to meet this challenge, I'm going to have to be a bigger person. I'm going to have to learn something. I'm going to have to take a class. I'm going to have to do something, right? We can move through our whole life being afraid of what others might see or what others might say or what others might do if they discover this or that about us. Or we can say, the more I step into my authentic self, the more I have to grow. The more you see me for who I really am, I'm going to have to grow. Because you're going to see a powerful presence. You're going to see the divine. And in order for you to see the divine and continue to see the divine, I'm going to have to start reflecting more of the divine. That means I'm going to have to get bigger. That means I'm going to have to keep growing. That means I'm going to have to keep studying. I'm going to have to become more of my authentic self so that you can continue to see it and we can continue to be in relationship with it. If you're afraid that somebody might see you for who you really are, what you're really afraid of is that there's something within you that's bigger than anything you're facing. There's something within you that is bigger than any challenge that you have in finances, in health, and relationship. There's something bigger. And because that something bigger exists, it wants to come out. It wants to come out and show itself as your life. You following what I'm saying? Yes. So we embrace the fear. We bring it to the light, ask it why it's here. We reframe it, and then we begin to return to love and take a step forward. And take a step forward, and take a step forward. Here's the bottom line of how we behave as human beings. We love what feels good. We love what feels good and what feels safe. And we will do what feels good and what feels safe over and over and over again. Amen? Amen. And we avoid what feels bad. Right? This is why fear is a terrible motivator. Because fear doesn't feel good. Right? So you're not going to go to the gym because you're afraid that if you don't, right? Somebody tries that on you, you're like, oh, right? Doctors have to do it all the time. Doctors try to make people afraid. Now, if you don't do this, you don't take this medication, you don't do this, you don't do that. But guess what? More and more people are coming into their office for that same condition every week. Right? Why? Because fear is a terrible motivator. We avoid what doesn't feel good. But when we understand that what confronts us as fears are really something to embrace so that we bring out more of our authentic self, then suddenly we can change the way we eat, we can change the way we behave, we can change the way we're in relationship, we can change things about ourselves because we're in relationship with a divine love. Because I love myself, I want to eat healthier. Because I love myself, I want to do this. Because I love myself, I want to circulate my money in such a way that makes me feel good and brings more prosperity into my life. I'm not afraid of anything. I don't need to squirrel money away to save because I'm afraid. But because I love myself, I want to have a good life here, and I want to have a good life here, and I want to have a good life over there, and so I'm going to circulate in these ways. Because I love myself, I'm going to be in relationship, and because I love myself, I want to know myself, and the best way to know myself is to be engaged with somebody else at a high level of intimacy. And so I'm going to expose myself and take a risk and let myself be known. Oh, I know somebody else broke my heart last time, but I'm going to take that risk again. Because I love myself, not because I'm trying to get something from somebody else, but because I love deeply inside of me what's trying to come out. And the only way to know it is in relationship with the universe and the life around us. Are you following what I'm saying? This is what it is to embrace and therefore transcend our fear. Take a breath. No fear can remain where faith holds sway, says Ernest Holmes. Faith reunites us with the original creative spirit, the divine mind which already exists at the center of our being. This kingdom of heaven, which is the kingdom of wholeness, is already within us. And so with that, I invite us to take a breath. Invite the practitioners to come forward and fan out in the room into a position in which you might be in conscious agreement with this prayer and extending the vibration and frequency of this prayer to every corner of the room. And wherever you are seated, including those online, know that this vibration is reaching you right now as we hold a collective space of prayer and affirmation. And with this breath, we affirm that there is one divine life and divine mind. It is the divine life and intelligence of the infinite power of the universe. It seeks to know itself and as you and as me and as all life and as all creation. And this one life now moving in through and as you and as me has no fears. It has no falters. It has no desire other than to be one with the dynamic presence from which it has come and to know itself dynamically as abundant health and prosperous finances and the divine flow of every good thing in your life, because it is the energy itself. And so it seeks to know itself through the experiences of everything that you are engaged with. Oh, allow yourself to be opened up, expanded, exposed, vulnerable, knowing that that vulnerability keeps you in relationship to what you have to, where you have to grow, what you have to know, how you have to keep your heart open so that you might know more of yourself through the things that frighten you just a little bit. Engage it. Bring it to the light. Ask why it's here. And know that it's part of the sacred divine covenant to bring you forward. There's a divine wisdom within you that knows. There's a divine intelligence within you that knows. There's a divine light within you that already knows, and it is capable. It is strong. It is prosperous. It is healthy. It is vibrant. And it is able and ready to meet every challenge. Oh, I know this to be the truth for the human race. I know this to be the truth for all of the planet, that there's a wisdom within us that is able to handle every environmental catastrophe, every challenge that we face in the relationship of our natural resources, that we continue to expand ourselves to be good stewards of the earth, not because we fear anything, but because we love the divine intelligence that is flowing in through and as me and as you and as all of life. There is an answer, there is a wisdom, there is an intelligence, and I affirm it and I declare that it is active now in you, in me, and in all life and in all creation. Oh, for this and so much more, I'm truly grateful and thankful as I take a breath and release this word, allowing it to be the law unto our life and the experience that we are having right here and right now. For this and so much more, I say thank you, God. And so it is. Thank you. Peace and blessings. Give ourselves a moment to come back. I don't know about you, but I always need a moment to come back in the body. Get anchored again. It's time for our circulation and our tithes and offerings, and our exact total on our Rev It Up is $34,036 as of right now. So that's not, what is that? $964 to go. $964. We get that today, then that will put us at $35,000, and that will be the magic number to meet our match. That was when we hit $20,000. We got the phone call that said we'll match the next $15,000 that comes in. So that will bring us up to 35. That'll make us hit that matching number, and that 15 will be added to the 35, which brings us to 50. So let's make it happen today. Yes? $964 I know is in the room right now and is going to come through. I remember there's a story of an old pastor who was, hey, right there it is, right there. Don't get me started. I'll do a full-on altar call right now. We'll just start throwing it on the stage like they do, right? They come up to the service and just throw the money at them. We can do it. Stop it now. I know an old pastor who got up one day and he said, I have good news and I have bad news. He says, the good news is I found all the money we need to do the building expansion, whatever they were doing in that particular thing. He says, the bad news is it's in your wallet. So I have good news today and gooder news. The good news is the money is here and it's coming forth now, and I'm grateful and thankful for that. So all the ways in which we're choosing to circulate this day, I am truly grateful and thankful. Let's hold those gifts as we do this affirmation together. I live in a universe of abundance. As I freely and joyfully give, I join in the divine flow, and all that I share with life returns to me multiplied abundantly. And so it is. All right.
Oh, yes, yes.